Greetings, friends. This is the Friends of Einstein Podcast, late February, episode 5. I'm Mark Brennan. I'm joined today by Fernando, Jelle, and John, all like minds in the world of Salesforce, AI, and Agentforce. So the purpose of the podcast is really to provide informative, sometimes entertaining, and always interesting conversation about what's going on in our world of AI in the Salesforce universe. And we've got a great agenda for you today. Firstly, let's do intros. Let's go through the screen as I see it. So, Fernando, tell us about you.
So I am a content marketer. I've been doing content marketing since 1998, essentially. And I was recently laid off of my corporate content marketing job, actually recently, in November of 2023. I call it the Pearl Harbor event for content marketers, where AI essentially created this mass layoff as well as content marketing agencies to pivot and to close doors, etc. But since that moment, marketers have been, I think, some of the most creative and innovative users of AI. And I have fully embraced using AI to enhance marketing, enhance the authentic voice of individual thought leaders, as opposed to just relying on AI 100%. There's a very subtle difference, but it's a very important difference as well. And I'm going all in on founder-led organic AI marketing.
Fantastic. Great to have you on. We have a special friend today, special guest, Jelle. Tell us about you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Jelle van Geuns, or Van Geuns as they pronounce it here. I'm founder and CEO of Cirra AI. We're building agents for Salesforce administration. I have a 13-year history in the Salesforce ecosystem. I had a previous company called Decisions on Demand, which did lead assignment. And before that, many years in different roles in enterprise software. So we're really, trying to get to the point where admins can rely on AI to do the bulk of their day-to-day admin work. You never have to go into the setup UI again. You can just communicate through text, potentially voice with your agent, and get it to do stuff for you, and then focus on the relationships with your users and customers.
Very exciting, and folks, we're going to have a segment on that today, and Jelle's going to tell us how it works, why he built it, etc. And over to John.
Excellent. Great to be with you, Mark and Fernando and Jelle. I am a software founder dating back to 1998 and love to hear the 90s from you, Fernando, as well. I was a Salesforce customer in 03, transitioned to being a consultant in 08, and continue my role as an architect. And I also have a program that helps turn soft skills into hard money, and always looking for ways to help people upskill with AI to put a cape on their role rather than have their role be replaced.
Excellent. Fantastic, guys. And just before I tell you about me, I have great connection with all three of you guys. So Fernando was the best friend of my youngest brother in the suburbs of London a long, long time ago. And we lost my brother Simon, sadly, to ALS. But it's great to be working with Fernando again. Jelle, you and I worked, I think about 10 years ago, wasn't it? We were doing the founder funding pitches. I think it was one of my investors put me in touch with you, and we worked on some stuff. That was great.
Yeah.
And John and I have worked together for a few years now. It's been fun. So I'm Mark Brennan. I'm the founder of Kind Labs, and Kind Labs hosts this podcast. Essentially, we are a Salesforce systems integrator partner. I've been doing this for a while. I kind of did I was done with corporate jobs by about 2012. I had been the acting CIO of Pandora, and I just prefer to be in a small boat and actually have the steering wheel, and to be in charge of the culture, the technical decisions, the architecture, and the hiring, and sometimes the firing. I think it just works better to not carry around somebody else's problems, but to fix the problems that I created. It's been a lot of fun. This is my third time around with the Salesforce partner company. And well, let's kick it off, guys. And great to have you on. So what do we have today? We're going to kick it off with the Salesforce economy. And, nobody would be listening to us if they weren't already kind of somewhat invested in the Salesforce universe. But let's just do a quick recap of Salesforce history. Founded in 1999, let's see. So in right before the dot-com bust, 2003, Dreamforce, the grand gathering of like-minded innovator minds coming together in a symposium. 2004, the initial public offering. 2006, the app exchange, the marketplace for developers and products that add value. 2008, the first attempt at a truly attractive user experience and user interface. 2009, Chatter. Gosh, Chatter it wasn't the home run that it was supposed to be, but it was a sign that Salesforce is a visionary company led by a visionary guy. So that was a long time ago now, 2009, for the connective tissue between the people communicating and the data talking to you. 2015, Lightning, second round of better user experience. 2016, Einstein, the first AI, and it wasn't very good. But like everything great, the first version of it wasn't necessarily all that great. But it really shows commitment to that investment. And Einstein now includes Agentforce, which we'll talk about in a second, of course, and we're talking about all the time. 2017, MuleSoft acquisition. 2021, Slack acquisition, and October 2024, Agentforce release, which we believe is already changing the world. Comments, guys. What do you want to go back to, and what do you want to talk about in there?
Well, I appreciate you with the retrospective on all the Dreamforce events that I went to, because I certainly remember hearing about many of those. I think certainly the Einstein element, even though you mentioned it wasn't that great, I think the idea that Salesforce had a very early inclination as to where things were going and was trying to make this palatable, kind of split it up into these little arenas that people could kind of sign on to from a menu. I think they were priced a little high to have really good adoption, but I think the strategy was a good one and is likely something that can still be maintained even in the Agentforce world. There's lots of ways to use kind of GPT functionality outside of Agentforce that many people don't know about. So I really appreciate and respect their willingness to kind of take a risk and trying to make things really accessible and palatable for people.
Absolutely, John. I think, the corporate world is kind of addicted to wanting to call something a home run. And if it wasn't a home run, it was a flop. But that's not how the real world works. Success is built on a series of attempts, and the first ones may fail, and you try again, and you try again. The first iPhone wasn't that good, but the world did realize that it's going to change the world. And so that's really what my comment about the first Einstein was. It was hard to get a good prediction. It's hard to get a good insight, and you needed really high quality data. You really needed to work at it. But some folks really did embrace it, and they got good results out of it even early on. So let's see a few stats out of the Salesforce world. So there are 10,000 agents now live, which is really a very impressive number. I wish that we had got to build 1,000 of those 10,000, but our numbers are somewhat lower than that.
That's a 10x growth since the last time that number came out, right? It was 1,000 to start.
It was 1,000 2 months ago when we last checked in on that number. So I'd love to see the distribution in terms of, is that some global 100 company, some of the biggest companies in the world with hundreds of agents each? Where's the long tail? How long is the long tail in the mid-market? What countries is that across? What industries is that across? We'll try to follow up with some info there. And folks, by the way, please hit us in the comments with your questions for what you'd like to hear more about. I'd like to also dig into some stats from Salesforce. These are really interesting, and they're not just kind of demographic stats, but they're kind of insights into, the conversations they're having. 54% of consumers don't care how they interact with a company as long as their problems are fixed quickly. Really interesting. I mean, we all know that the call center is broken, and the FAQs are, I'm not going to go there, right? So that we just don't have time to go read 400 FAQs to look for the right one. And bots that are not AI driven are not good. So we're still in that place where we want our problems solved, but we don't care if it's an AI on the other end. 39% of consumers are already comfortable with AI's scheduling appointments. Really, I think I'd like to see that number higher, 39%. I think we should be at 50 something percent very soon, a couple of months from now. No problem at all. My appointment being scheduled by a
I
bot.
think if people experienced it, they would probably love it. These are probably the people who explicitly knew that they have experienced that.
Exactly. I mean, the first time you experience and it works, great. That you're now on the other side of the fence. Over a third, 34% of consumers would work with an AI agent instead of a person to avoid repeating themselves. That's becoming a little bit. I'm seeing that a little bit better already in handoffs. You call your credit card company or maybe your health insurance or some giant company where it used to be a terrible experience. It's getting a little bit better that. Hand off to the human and they're able to look back and you don't need to explain again. It's improving slowly. 37% of consumers are already comfortable with AI agents creating more personalized content. Sometimes we don't realize that it is personalized. We think that message was just written by somebody. I think that number 37% should go up reasonably soon. Any comments on any of those, guys?
I mean, I think that there's, sorry, go ahead, Jelle.
Yeah, I was going to, sorry.
Go ahead.
You go ahead then. I was going to say that some of these things like the handoff are actually not even AI related. So there's a foundation of just standard software engineering stuff that has to be done right for AI to work. And it's sometimes surprising that wasn't done, but maybe AI will shine a light on those deficiencies and make it more obvious and put more priority behind fixing those.
Yeah, agreed. I think I was commenting on when it is clearly an AI, a bot of some kind that I was interacting with, and then it's a handoff to a human. I think that has got better.
Yeah, and I've seen some anecdotal evidence. There's a marketing expert that I follow on LinkedIn. I've been following him since, for about 15, 16 years. He just published a book about marketing in the AI age, and he says that actually AI is showing more empathy than sometimes even humans. And in the last episode, we talked about my friend who's starting to experiment with AI calling agents to follow up on real estate leads. And not only are they available 24/7, but they show more empathy in that, they're not trying to push a sale. They are trying to push the sale, but they couch it with empathetic statements before then turning a question around or an objective around and asking a soft question, which obviously it's programmed to do. But sometimes humans, I think, either they get nervous or whatever, they'll just constantly go for the question. And it's really interesting. I'm wondering if these stats that you just mentioned have to, are as a result of programmed empathy within the AI bots.
My take is that it's just an improved experience where you're getting what you need. So another stat that I was just about to read out is that customers walk away from 1/3 of customer service interactions without getting what they came for. They just give up. And it's very easy to give up on a chat, but you can also hang up. And so that's an alarming statistic where really it's not so much a problem as a giant opportunity.
I would absolutely agree. I mean, what I hear between the fusion of both of those, right? So the demand ironically, for very, very human skills like tenacity, fortitude, emotional commitment to the outcome, right? That high empathy of putting myself in the customer's shoes and really trying to work. And that sense of having that equanimity and the consistency of not being moody, not getting impatient. People have sometimes vendettas. They get frustrated. They're slow, or they're quick to get frustrated, right? Not understanding the pain and plight of the person who's calling. This is what's interesting about AI is because I can ground and basically frame that conversation by saying, "Hey, you're this kind of person. You're going to have this kind of an interaction," and it's the same whether I do it 100 times, 1,000 times, or 1,000,000 times. And that is something that is very difficult to compete with. So we, on the human side, we're going to still have a role to play on the upper echelon of these items. And we can actually learn a lot from AI in that respect to say, hey, this is how we can serve the client. Let's make sure 1/3 of the people I talk to don't leave with nothing. Yeah. There's always something I can eke out here. How do I get vested and really dig deep to try and figure out? And we all know those people. You're on the phone with somebody and you're like, wow. This person, I don't care how long I had to hold. I knew they were on the other end and they were going to bat. They were digging holes. They were shaking trees. They were doing whatever they could to make sure I got help.
and you appreciate it.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, there are tons more stats we could look into, but I wanted just to scrape a few and see what you guys comment on. Fernando, did you have something you wanted to go back to?
No, but I just, to John's point, I think marketers and salespeople could learn a lot from those human attributes. And in fact, there's a friend of mine is actually a CMO of a company that does sales training with AI, with actually visually represented AI bots, where it's like sales shadowing, where they can interact with actual customers. And I think AI is with these attributes of patience, fortitude. What are some of the other words you mentioned, John? Empathy,
tenacity.
They're actually now being used as training tools with particular software applications that are used to train Salesforces. They could be also used to train customer service teams, etc. So I think that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree.
Excellent. Well, guys, 2 episodes ago, we talked about the efficiency of teams, not just consulting teams doing a specific project for an organization, but in-house teams, any kind of team, and how we're expecting everybody to be more efficient because of AI. And we also talked about, well, for consulting firms, the client is pretty savvy and is asking for the team size to be reduced and for the throughput to be increased. And they're asking, how are you doing that? And so that led us to think up at the following episode, which was really all about tools. And that was great. It was a really great conversation. Just at every phase of where you are in the progression, there's at least one AI tool that can make an individual and or a team faster, better, more accurate, and is able to take the grunt out of that part of the job. So today we wanted to invite Jelle, who has built a thing that helps administrators. So tell us, what did you build? Why did you build it? And how does it help?
Yeah, so why did I build it? In my previous 11 years working with Salesforce customers, I've seen many times where seemingly simple changes can take a really long time to get done, not because they're complex or especially challenging, but just because the teams trying to implement them are bogged down with a million tasks that they need to get through. And so you get into these cycles where, it's in the queue for so long, by the time, they get to it, it's kind of obsolete or things have changed, so you have to redo it. And it's kind of a doom cycle. And a lot of that work that those teams are doing is just not creative work. It's not the work that they want to be doing, but it's work that needs to be done. I figured that AI is at a level now then that it can take over a whole lot of that's not creative, not interesting work. Specifically, anytime you have to basically go into the setup UI for Salesforce, that's an opportunity to automate it, because almost none of that is work that's creative, but it can be really time consuming. In addition, kind of understanding what is in your Salesforce org, so what do you have to set up, what are the changes that need to be made, what's already there, how do you make sure you don't do the same thing again that's already been done. All of that requires diligent digging through the org, comparing of artifacts, sometimes dozens of them. So very time consuming stuff, but again not especially creative. That is the goal still for Cirra AI, is to help with that low hanging fruit. So basically doing simple things like creating objects, fields, permission sets, profiles, down the road validation rules, etc. Helping take just natural language specifications of what those should look like and turning that into metadata implementation that you can push into your DevOps flow, and saving, depending on the case, 90% of the time, while automatically documenting things, making it repeatable. You can just replay it as often as you need it. You can do it in multiple orgs. You have a track record exactly of what was changed, and it's all human readable. So you don't have to dig through logs or XML files or whatever to see the changes that were done.
Very exciting. So just to play that back to you, a system administrator robot, you speak to it in natural language, or you type natural language of what you want to do. It translates that into metadata instructions that go in through the API layer into Salesforce and actually do those admin tasks, like creating objects, creating fields, probably all the kind of look up relationships, all of that type of thing. And then it tells you what it's done, shows it to you, and asks you if that's okay. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much, except it asks you whether it's okay before it does it. So you don't, and you get a chance to tweak if something is wrong. You get a chance to ask it for advice if you're not sure what the right answer is for a particular setting. It can dig through what's already in your org and give you suggestions on how things would work with what's already there. But yes, that's pretty much the flow. And again, right now it's focused on stuff that is pretty simple, but we are looking at it going up the stack where you can start with a higher level requirement and like a bigger business objective, and it will help you break that down into the smaller bits and then implement each individual piece also.
Fantastic. And John, by the way, Kind of Labs got a beta to this, so Jelle gave us access early, and so this is available to us. I'm super impressed, really impressed. What questions do you have, John, as you hear the description?
Yeah, well, I think well done. There is a tremendous amount of structured, repetitive activity that happens for any given admin. And I think this is a tremendously beneficial. Some people might look at it as, fewer hours to bill, but I think it moves us up to a next echelon of expertise that is going to help make the user experience and the overall org, just the amount of technical debt that people have to deal with, right? We have to uncover time to do that. So I'm curious, for example, I don't know if there's actually a tool called Klein. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's CLI and editor, where it runs inside VS Code. I'm biased to the name, of course, but it has essentially a plan and act mode.
He didn't write it, by the way.
Yeah, I didn't write it.
It just happened to be.
I'm happy to represent it. How about that? So I do use it every day, but it's essentially a developer. It's like an AI engineering tool, but it has this great plan and act dichotomy. So you can go into plan mode and it's all like, okay, great. I'm not here to do anything right now. I'm here to help you. I'm basically like an on-demand digital architect with you, trying to work with you and figure out what you want to do. Let's break it down. Let's plan it. And it sounds like you're looking to do something like that to help people start at those higher level activities, fill in the gaps, make sure they actually know what they're doing, talk through the implications before they actually execute. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. There's two aspects to that. One is the product that we have released now is called the change agent. So that will take piece of spec in whatever format it might be in, analyze it, make sure that it's correct, feed it back to you, make sure that you can make the changes and implement it. Next up is something called, we're going to be calling the admin agent, which is more of a chat-based interface where you can ask questions of your org, you can ask for suggestions, you can kind of do that prep work. Just thinking it through with an expert advisor on what the right strategies would be, as well as just automating simple day-to-day tasks like creating users, removing them, adding permission sets, stuff that would take time otherwise, and that could be interfaced from Slack as well, and not just from our web UI. And then the third thing is kind of what you were referring to, is the higher level planning. So as of now, it does a little bit of that, and the admin agent can help you with that, but it's not fully integrated, not to the level we would like. So the goal is to be able to start at just a concept, like we want to implement this capability for our organization, and then have the tool help you break it down either in Jira or in our tool, and then move to the execution part of it. But that's forward-looking stuff. But that's where we think we're heading.
That's where you're headed. So what's can you give us a spoiler? Next release, what do you think is coming out?
The next release will be the admin agent. So that's the chat-based interface, and that should be hopefully within a month or so. We basically have that built already. We just need to reskin it a little bit, and adding more capabilities in terms of the metadata. Right now we're doing objects, fields, and permission sets, page layouts, profiles, and stuff.
And you'll
need to do additional things on top of that. And the higher level thinking, that's probably going to be 6 months or so when we start to have that come out a little bit. We'll be doing a Jira integration before that also, hopefully.
Fantastic. So you will expand the capabilities and the scope of what it's doing, but you want to get better at what it's currently able to do. How's it going in the marketplace? How's it being received? What are people saying? What are your current customers telling you?
So far, pretty great. We just launched last week. So we have 60 plus as last check signups for our free trial and people using the product. We have demos scheduled every day to explain and discuss use cases. So really good feedback. I think it's an early tool, so there's some limitations, but people really get where it's going. And we're not seeing a lot of pushback saying, "Oh, this is going to take my job." I mean, people kind of understand that these are things they don't really want to do, and that's not where their value is. So if they can have a tool do it for them, John, you mentioned earlier that there's a little bit of within the consulting world, some concern about, okay, these were hours that we were billing, but it seems to me pretty clear that people will have to adapt to that anyway and find ways to be more productive and bill for something more valuable, potentially at higher rates, hopefully.
I agree. I'm curious. Go ahead, Mark, finish your thought.
No, you first.
I'm curious if there's a host of people listening or otherwise who have Salesforce and really only have a fractional, sometimes no admin at all. And are you imagining that these tools are something that would be a good fit to kind of help them cover a wider array of activities before they call in some backup from, managed services or a consultant?
Yes, I definitely think it will help anybody who's administering, whether they're officially the admin or they're just, that's just tacked onto their day job, really. But if they're doing the work, then this will help them to do that work faster and in a more structured and predictable way. I think you're still going to need
some knowledge,
good expertise on Salesforce, just like, you can open up, Cursor and try to code something and, you can probably get something working, but you're not a programmer. So you're not going to be a real admin or consultant just because a tool can do things for you. But as an admin or a consultant, you can be a lot more productive. And as a beginner, you can at least do the basics and do those, with some level of predictability.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering, who did you have in mind in particular out of those sort of three personas that you mentioned? What was the one person that you had in mind specifically to kind of solve some kind of pain they had when it come to, Salesforce administration?
So it's the more experienced admin, I guess, the admin who knows how to do all these things, but shouldn't be spending their time doing it.
Yeah,
because they can spend their time better.
That's right.
As well as consultants, who are under the gun to deliver quickly, and as you mentioned, Mark, with more pricing pressure or more time pressure because the customer is saying, oh, well, why is the AI not doing this? So we're trying to make it such that the AI can actually do some of it. So those two personas, but I would say for the admin agent that's coming out soon, that would be really 100% focused on the admin. The change agent would be both a more advanced admin and a consultant.
That's right. Guys, there's a little bit of this is super exciting, Jelle. It's really great what you're doing here. A little bit of anecdotal sort of to add on to that. I was talking to the chief strategy officer of one of the largest US consulting firms that have a big Salesforce practice, but also Google Cloud and Microsoft and kind of 3 or 4 other big practices. And in his role as strategy guy, he foresees a day not too far where so many personas drop out of the sales and execution flow so that AI can actually have an interview or a series of interviews with a prospective client and can then write a full project proposal, priced out everything, can write it with a human just kind of maybe sending the email and showing up to the meeting. The AI did it, and then the AI is able to actually do all of the configuration and construction, including code. But in the Salesforce world, where most of it can be done without code, is going to be able to do that. So he wouldn't commit to how long. He just said not future. So, what's going to happen is for all consulting and services type businesses, the number of hours, billable hours, is going to go down, but what we do with them is going to go up. And so, the other anecdotal there is compare that to the software engineering world, which is in a very similar situation where a number of software engineers are recently out of work and may struggle to get another job as good as the one they just came out of, but they will. I mean, if they're bright and they will They will. But a few rock stars at the top of that pyramid are actually getting paid 7 figures for a few months' work to do the work of 10 people. And that is actually happening, which is quite astonishing. And the way they're doing that, of course, is with superhuman powers of various different AI tools multiplying their productivity.
Well, just to highlight on that, it gets me a picture because I'm thinking about the product you're building. One question I'm going to have for you in a second is what kind of guardrails and kind of warnings and things, because there's a lot of things you can do in the Salesforce world. I could go in Apex and say, delete all records, right? And that's great. There's no stopping me inside Salesforce. If it just asks me if I want to execute, it doesn't evaluate what I'm actually about to execute, right? So I'm curious about the guardrails that you're thinking through and leveraging some of that expertise. But to the wider point, Mark, that you mentioned and a little bit of Fernando earlier, the way I look at it is kind of, we think about being in the weeds versus the top of the trees. So I think about, that many of us have been kind of in the roots and on the trunk doing a lot of the stuff to enable us to get up higher on the trunk. And many of us specialize in a certain branch or two, et cetera. And it's interesting because these tools, as well as AI in general, like the comparative shopping, the comparative analysis, when it comes to estimating, when it comes to alternative options, trade-offs, this is all reference material now. And so essentially AI is taking most of the trunk and pushing us up into the branches. And now we have the ability to actually operate and add value into a lot of these different branches if we're willing. It does take a reinvention of what we consider what is our role, much like many of these admins, right, who have a full-time job on Salesforce. Once they have a tool like this, well, half their job might be opened up, and now they can maybe do more business analysis, actually get more insight into what users want, what customers want. We can go down and say, well, we have customers that have end customers. Maybe we need to dig in more there, and that's much more difficult work for AI to do, is that exploration, that discovery, those diary, kind of exercises. That's an example, I think, where AI can really enable work that's not being done today, but really would be beneficial to have done today if it were possible and time were available.
Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I was listening to another podcast earlier, and there's similar discussion about, developers, software developers. And I had that same experience myself where, you don't need to know a language or a framework or whatever to be productive in at least making some sort of incremental changes to it. You just need to kind of understand, what code and configuration looks like enough to understand when the model is maybe making a mistake or when it's like doing things in a too complicated way.
That's right. This is not for the person who doesn't have domain knowledge. It's really for the person who needs to accelerate. They have knowledge and they just need to operate faster, right?
Right. And so that means also that maybe now you're a Salesforce admin and you're only doing Salesforce, but with tools like this for Salesforce and other platforms, you could be, taking care of the 2-3 other tools as well without necessarily, having to spend years building expertise in those fields. You just understand, how the enterprise systems work together. And you can say, well, I need this tool to have that field, and I need it to map to that Salesforce field, and kaboom, it's done.
Yeah, Jelle, one of my favorite analogies is the DJ, right? So we're getting to a place where people are talking about, out of the next unicorn companies, some of them will have 5 people, and we're not far away from the day where there'll be a unicorn that actually is just one person. So there's your DJ filling a stadium, and it's just one person making all that music. So good, guys. Let's talk about what a time check we want to move into. Let's do, by the way, folks, we'll put a link below to Jelle's company so you can get in touch. And and also for all of our respective companies. But let's talk about use cases that we really like. I mean, there are lots of different things that you can do, use cases that others might know about, but let's talk about ones that we've seen recently. And maybe over to you, Fernando. Do you want to talk about a marketing story that is dear to your heart?
Yeah, well, maybe I could use myself as a marketing story or a case study. But, I think that, like I said earlier, I think that marketers have been on the kind of the cutting edge in terms of trying to figure out how to implement generative AI, to their jobs. And one of the things that I'm seeing out there is like what we talked about earlier, the ultimate scenario of there being a one-person unicorn. On the way there, we're going to be seeing whole marketing departments being encapsulated into maybe a team of 3 people, 2, or even 1 person. So I was actually at a dinner on Saturday night in Mexico City. I'm actually in a small city of Uruapan, Mexico right now, but I was at a dinner with a client of mine in Mexico City, and we met with one of his friends, and his friend is a CEO founder of a fintech that does factoring. So you go online and it's all completely digital. And he essentially fired his whole marketing team except for 1 person to do the marketing for him. He uses HeyGen to do very realistic videos of him. All he had to do was just to do a selfie video of him just speaking gibberish, right? And then he uses, there's a couple of copywriting AIs that if you don't want to go in and use, create a custom GPT or a Claude project or a Gemini Gem or whatever, there's some copywriting AI tools that you pay a little bit more for, but they already have all the copywriting prompts that you need. And so what he does is with this person and himself, they just write the content, they put it to the HeyGen video, it creates the videos, and then they create the content for their SEO. So they're essentially doing YouTube, they're doing content for SEO purposes, they're creating content for LinkedIn. It's something that used to be done by a team of 5 people, right? And so we were playing devil's advocate, my client and me, asking his friend, this founder of this fintech, well, aren't you worried about AI looking like AI to people? And he says, you know what, in the factoring world where people just want cash flow for their business, they don't care. They don't care. We just want to put the information out there, et cetera. Now, I don't see this happening for founder-led marketing where you actually have to establish thought leadership for a product or a product or service that's complicated. But even then, like what I'm doing is, the promise of the service that I'm offering is, look, Mr. CEO or founder or whatever, let's record you for an hour every week, kind of like what we're doing right here. So this is a perfect example. We're doing an hour-long episode. All you have to do is spend 1 hour waxing poetic about some point of view that you have, or about your thoughts on the industry trends, or what's the newest release of your company, et cetera. And then with these AI workflow processes that create content with your voice, so you could set up a custom GPT or et cetera that's completely knows your company, with documents about who your personas are, documents about your offers, documents about your writing style and voice, et cetera. So you can create a whole cascade of content for your blog, for social media. An hour's worth of content like this, spoken word content is roughly about 10,000 words. So a 10,000 word transcript can turn into, multiple dozens of pieces of content that can be used. And then with things like make.com, et cetera, I found out from interviewing somebody on my podcast that there's Zapier, there's make.com, there's a whole bunch of other ones, but the one that he found most handy is called N8N. I don't know if you've heard of N8N. And he's using that to kind of come up with a fully automated AI-driven marketing process that'll not only take in the audio and create the transcript for you, but it'll create all the content, and then it'll set it up on your WordPress blog or whatever your website.
End to end? Gosh.
Yeah, end to end, but he still has to have, any good marketer will have the human in the loop to make sure that there wasn't any mistakes, or that the voice is accurate according to all the sample content you provided to them. There's still going to be, he's still going to say, in a world of this and that and the other, those kind of telltale signs of this AI language. But I really see a scenario where you're going to see the one-person marketing department, or in the case of this fintech guy that I met at dinner last night, he might just have half a person marketing department, or maybe a 0-person marketing department. Just the CEO doing it with automated videos of him that look exactly like him.
The effect of a fairly beefy marketing team, if they were, a couple of years ago, that would have been all people.
Exactly.
Right. Amazing. Good stuff. Fantastic. Well, I want to talk about my favorite one at this moment. Can't give out too much detail about it, but, a lot of Agentforce builds are really about a fairly, I wouldn't say simple, but we're relieving the humans in the team of some simple carry tasks that they don't want to do anymore. They want to give it to an agent. So the agents are working alongside the humans, not replacing the humans, but giving them more bandwidth to go do more valuable stuff. Here we have a bioscience research team, small company, and what we're doing here is helping researchers at a very high level. These are like very, very high level people, but the research they're doing, when you break it down, has a lot of manual carry. And so 2025 is the year of agentic AI stepping in to take the place or take a big slice of the pie of what consumer AI was doing, even in the workplace. You're sitting in front of ChatGPT or Claude or one of the LLMs, and you're asking it one prompt at a time, and then you're manually taking the response to go do something. And you're already more productive, but you're taking that response and you're going to do something else with it. So now we are building an agent that actually does multiple steps of a fairly complex research process. And that includes several complex lookups into publicly available data in data banks and layering, taking that output and putting it together into a new prompt that will go somewhere else and formulate the basis for the next stage. So this is not replacing humans, but it is incredibly exciting because you can't do this with consumer AI. Now, what happens 2 years from now is Grok 5 going to be able to just do a whole project for you with multiple phases in it? Maybe. But right now, you can't do this with consumer AI, and an agent is actually able to understand what it needs to put into, phase one, what it gets out of phase one, and reformats it, uses it, and formulates it to put into the basis for phase two, etc. So we are super excited. We'll keep you guys updated as we get further along. Obviously, confidentiality applies, but very exciting stuff. I just love this use case because it is accelerating the work of a very bright person and allowing them to do what they're good at and carrying for them the part that they're going to find a little bit fastidious. So super exciting.
It might be useful just for the sake of trend spotting and for the listener to kind of, everybody, we all have to reinvent ourselves, right? It's just part of the nature. And I was thinking as you were speaking of the example of, it used to be, think about the evolution that's happened with vehicles, right? I used to go out to my car and I would grab my crank and I would go to the front and I would crank, right? And I'd start the engine. And so if someone would ask me like, what do I do to get from A to B, right? Well, I crank, I get in, and now I'm driving and I'm navigating, right? I'm doing all the things. I have my manual horn, right? And all of these things to get along. And then eventually it came along and the starter. Okay, great. Now I come in, I get in, I have a key, I go through, I start, same thing. So then, fast forward, now I no longer have a manual transmission. I now have an automatic transmission. So now I start the car, I go into a general direction, forward or backward, and now it takes care of the rest for me. Well, now we have, anybody who's been in a Tesla or, I was in a Waymo vehicle when I was at Architect Dreamin' a month ago, and that is all taken as well. So these are new layers of abstraction as we kind of add on these features. And it begs the question when we say, like, what does it mean for me to drive? Is driving really the important job?
That's
or is
right.
it really me to be present? Is it really me to add value? Is it really for me to contribute with wherever it is I'm going? And I think that metaphor is really important as we think about our own employment jobs and the activities that we do. There's a gentleman, I believe it's Peter Drucker, who said, never confuse activity with progress. And so I think this is just following the same suit. There's just more and more layers of abstraction, and it helps us redefine what actually do I do here? Like, why am I valuable? Am I valuable because I have the horn, I start the car, all of these? Or am I valuable because when I get to where I'm going, I do something really meaningful with the people who are there, and it gets us focused on those higher echelon elements.
Correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the future belongs to those who have imagination and who are looking ahead at where the puck is going and how can I get there? How can I be there? And I think the future looks less inviting for the practical-minded administrator type who's really much more interested in security and locking down the status quo. life is going to be a little less comfortable as we innovate at a faster pace. That person's going to have to adjust and just be okay with more stuff happening more quickly. John, did you want to talk, John, about use cases? Did you have?
Well, I had one example. I think 10,000 agents is incredible. The number of agents per customer could be proliferating. So certainly on our side, there's still some resistance, confusion, maybe a few roadblocks related to Agentforce. And one area I think that's very under-leveraged when we think about starting to take advantage of the model and some of this GPT functionality is thinking about Prompt Builder. And Prompt Builder started as kind of AI DIY, as kind of Mark Benioff discussed it, but really Prompt Builder can do a lot of very interesting things. Like one example is, I was listening to a presentation at Cactus Force, and my friend Peter just highlighted, he said, we have orders. We're a creamery. We're selling cheese and cottage cheese and stuff. And we know what people have bought for like the last 10 years. And we don't have a sales team because we're struggling to be a creamery in San Francisco where everybody else has moved because it's too expensive here. So we want our Salesforce to be our salespeople, basically. And he said, well, the way I can do this is I can go back into order history. I can look through seasonality. I can look through averages. I can set thresholds with some basic business rules. Like we can't sell less than 6 of these. We can't sell less than 8 of these at a time, right? We need to organize them around pallets, things like that. I used to have to do a flow to go back into that order history, set up all of that logic inside, figure out what are the actual decisions, right? And then ultimately create a future-looking order that we could just email them to say, hey, this looks like what you'd probably want in your next order. Confirm or make any adjustments.
Love it.
And now you just have somebody who's going to do that. Well, now you don't even need that. You can use Prompt Builder, which is just a slight additional license on top of Sales Cloud. You don't actually need all the Agentforce licenses to do this. And so incrementally, you could just write 3 lines of text. Hey, look back, take the average of the last 6 months. If they ordered less than this, make it 6. If they ordered more than that, make it 12. Organize it into elements that are divisible by 7 for the sake of the palette, and create a new order with lines, and then email it out to the contact. You can actually do all of that with a few lines of code. You don't have to have the flow. So the maintainability of that, the ability to, it makes it accessible, and all of the logic is just in what you're defining. So it's essentially the requirement or the story actually becomes the execution in many ways. So there's numerous examples like that. Just for the sake of time, I just wanted to highlight that particular one. But you have data enrichment. You were talking earlier about the handoffs from a chat interface to a person. A really good use there is when the handoff happens, a quick Prompt Builder summary is done. And you can provide a quick paragraph that goes through all their order history, all their case history, all their activity history, and just basically gives a nutshell that a person on the phone can read in 15 seconds and really know that person much, much better, which is a great experience for them. And another great use of a simple Prompt Builder summary.
That's a terrific story, John. I think part of our job here is to tell everyone, just to shout it from the rooftops, because there's so many people who don't realize what they could be doing in their own world. I feel like, there needs to be more hours in the day where we can get out there and just talk to more people, while, we have to spend a lot of time learning and keeping up with things, because what we learned last week is already out of date. It's moving so fast. Let's talk about tips and lessons learned. We want to give useful information to our audience, but we don't want to say the same thing all the time. So what are our favorite tips this week in terms of lessons learned, things we're seeing out there? Who wants to go first?
I'll take a stab at a tip. And this is particularly for people who are creating content or doing marketing and creating content more than anything. There's a term that I just learned called context chunking, which is, and maybe you all are already familiar with this under a different name, learned about it from the marketer Russ Henneberry. But context chunking is, instead of copying and pasting or writing these massive prompts into ChatGPT or Claude or what have you for generative AI, you do it in phases, right? So instead of saying, write an article with these, with this source document, it could be a transcript, make sure it's structured this way, make sure to put it in this voice. I mean, it's really a huge thing. And sometimes all the details get lost by the AI. And that's when people get frustrated and they start saying, no, you did it wrong. You have to add this. Instead, you do it in phases, right? So he said, okay, take this context, take this transcript, give me 3 or 4 main ideas from this. Okay, a main idea. Okay, great. Give me an outline for this. I'll give you an outline. Then you change it. And then, okay, here's a couple of articles that I've written in the past. Can you understand these and give me the description of the voice and tone I'm going to use? Okay, here's the voice and tone you're going to use. Okay, now write the article based on the outline you gave me and based on this tone, voice and tone, and then it'll write you the article. So it's sort of like, it's what he calls context chunking, but it allows you to kind of progressively build an optimal result with your AI as opposed to trying to, do these very unwieldy prompts that end up, a lot of the stuff end up lost in translation by the AI. And that's when the AI starts to hallucinate, So this way you kind of avoid or minimize the hallucinations.
It's good. It's good. I think my favorite one, just from the last few weeks, is the non-linear project. So whether you're doing a project in-house with your own folks and getting it signed off by an exec somewhere in your world, or whether you have a partner coming in to do this for you, we've all been trained to think about a timeline and a budget for a traditional project. And when a project goes over one of those, it's kind of in the red zone and everyone's in trouble. Agile came along to try and coach people into thinking a little bit differently, but we're still stuck that way because there's a number we need to get approved from, somebody with a signature. So we're still thinking that way, but really with an AI project, you absolutely have to think about iterations that will get you better at, this is not code, right? This is natural language most of the time. And when you're not getting the response that you want, it's just a question of it's about asking the question better or in a different way. And it's about adjusting guardrails or adjusting grounding data, adjusting prompt engineering. It's not so mechanical as code where which line of code is responsible for that behavior. Go fix it and it should work. It's really try this. And a larger project is going to go non-linear, and we've got to train everybody to think of it that way. Yes, we can get to a go live and we can get to a place where it's good enough to deploy, but it's going to get better. It's going to get better from here because we're going to continue refining several of the variables in that world so that their response keeps getting better and better. John, you're seeing this all the time, right?
Yeah, and it's certainly a topic. You're exactly right. I mean, the mindset is hard. And one of the things I think that makes it doubly challenging is that there's a certain amount of anxiety people bring to the table with AI conversations generally. Certainly there's the rarity, right? Like Reuven Cohen, I follow him, and he's just always the tip of the spear, the fog cutter out there just trying to figure things out and bring back whatever he learned. But the majority of people are a little more hesitant, even though they use consumer AI. As soon as they know it's going to potentially affect their role, they're going to be responsible for it, they're going to be held accountable, the whole stakes change. And part of the safety of a traditional project is that deterministic response. When I do X, I always get to Y. And if I ever don't get to Y, it's out of bounds and we need to fix it. Whereas now we're moving towards that element of like, well, is the gestalt acceptable? That's a totally different question. And it's non-deterministic. So getting people into that mindset of saying, hey, this is like a person. It's like you're on a sales call with somebody. Sometimes you do have syntax questions. I need you to ask it in this specific way. But most of the time, it's not. You're responding to the user. You're providing the vernacular and the conversational tone and style that really aligns with them. And we need to think about AI in the same way. So I think a lesson learned for me is, as you mentioned, the learning is immersive. I mean, I had a couple nights where I was up till 2 a.m, experimenting, building apps and stuff on Klein. And essentially I'm doing a little bit of comparative study between the 4 major models right now, watching the Grok 3 release and then going and doing some experimentation. It can be a lot. And so I think the lesson learned for me is I learn best, ironically, when I turn it off. And so I started reading the book on Hamilton that's inspired the entire musical.
Yeah.
And it just reminded me of how refreshing it is to do that, to go offline and then to come back to that work. As you mentioned, Jelle, like Fernando, actually, the chunking, right? Like I can come back and with my assistant and it's just waiting. It remembers what I talked about a day ago and we just continue the conversation. I don't lose any context there, which is great. But it was a good reminder to just stay present and remember that we have a well-rounded life to live. And I need to continue investing in all of those other areas as well with the family and such to kind of disconnect. So that was a good lesson for me this week.
That's very good. You could be stuck on some code and you could stare at it and it might actually kind of jump out at you, go, aha, but it might not. And you might need to go for a walk and come back. But I think even more so when, an AI element is just not behaving properly at all, staring at it may not get you to where you need to just walk away and think about it fresh and try different things. I don't know. In my experience so far, we often don't know what it is that needs to be adjusted, but there almost always is a way to dramatically improve what we're getting. And another one that is maybe next time when we have Haneen back on, our data scientist, but we're hearing people talk about, well, we have Snowflake and when the data quality is kind of so-so but it's not good enough to have an AI kind of rely on it. And I think our response to that is don't worry about that, because the data that you need for agentic AI to start helping you isn't necessarily the same data in an analytics data lake type of things. Some of it is not even resident in your stack. And some of it is, if we need it, we can get it in a zero copy, small data cloud implementation that isn't competing with your business analytics at all. So leave Snowflake over there, let it serve its purpose for its initial sort of investment intended value. Don't mess with it. And then aside from that, build what you need for your AI in Data Cloud or in some other. But I mean, I think Data Cloud is the right answer just because you have this no copy possibility here. You can have fairly large amounts of external data that feels like it's there, but it's not. So I think that's a tip for just as you're contemplating a project. If data quality and Snowflake or your data lake is the obstacle, we would say it isn't. You can get to where you need to be with only the data that's going to help the next agent that you're building, and you can do that in a small Data Cloud implementation.
Very good.
Yep, makes sense.
Good, guys. I think we're kind of reaching the end of today's. This is great having you on. Folks, please give us questions, comments, requests for topics in the comments. We will be sure to, if they're within our realm of knowledge and interest, we will absolutely bring them in and talk about them. So Fernando, Jelle, and John, thank you so much for coming today. Any closing comments?
It's just an honor to be here with you guys. You always bring such smart, interesting people on the podcast, Mark.
See you guys.
Yeah, well, second that. Thank you, Mark. It was great to be here and great to meet you, Fernando and John.
Yep, my pleasure. And thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for all you're doing to advance and just help people kind of along this journey. Everyone needs a Sherpa to take them up their mountain. And so excited to continue the conversation.
Thanks, folks. We'll be back soon. Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Bye.